We've got the news last night that Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, is facing yet more accusations that he broke lockdown rules. This time it's about his government property in Chequers, which is his grace and favour country home in Buckinghamshire that every Prime Minister is allowed to use. However, latest accusations are that he could have broken yet more lockdown rules at the height of the pandemic. We don't know specifically what those allegations are at the moment. But essentially what has happened is Boris Johnson is due to face the COVID inquiry, which is due to start in a few months' time. And essentially he has handed over his ministerial diaries to people at the Cabinet Office who've been looking through this ahead of that evidence gathering process. And instead, they apparently were so concerned by what they had seen in the reports of his ministerial diary that they have passed on information to the police. Thames Valley Police and the Met Police are now investigating whether any lockdown rules may have been broken at Chequers, as well as the Downing Street investigations, which the Met Police previously focused on. It's going to open up a whole new can of worms for Boris Johnson. He's at the moment facing this Privileges Committee investigation into whether he lied to MPs about what he knew about those lockdown parties. The question on everyone's lips here today is whether they will seek to try and reopen their investigation and delay the painful him even further. His days may well be numbered as a political heavyweight. And obviously, let's not forget that his Uxbridge seat is very, very vulnerable at the next election. At the moment, he says he has every intention of standing for Uxbridge at the next election. However, I think that's really going to depend on how the next few weeks and months go for him. This Privileges Committee investigation that was basically been going on for months and months. We saw it a couple of months ago. Boris gave evidence to the MPs on that committee, insisting I've absolutely done nothing wrong. I followed all the rules as I understood them at the time. I did not lie to you about what I knew about them. However, obviously, I think the British public have probably made up their mind differently. We've got into a really big divide, I think, in Britain about whether those lockdown breaches were acceptable or not. And I think quite a lot of the public will say, well, actually, I was staying at home and you guys were having a drink in the office, whether it was work allowed or not, doesn't seem very fair. But yes, speaking to Boris Johnson's allies, I think some of them are still really keen for him to launch this long-awaited comeback. But I think for him, I think he probably knows that his time in office has probably come to pass and is not expecting to make any sort of big returns to British politics yet. I think he's frustrated with how the whole process has gone. He's obviously frustrated with Rishi Sunak for resigning and bringing down his government in the first place. And obviously seeing him in number 10 every day can't help those frustrations anymore. But I don't quite see that he's got this ambition to return to the top job, even if Rishi Sunak falls. I don't think people are quite prepared to put him back in Downing Street. We've been talking about lockdown and Partygate and all these COVID measures for so long. There is definitely a section of the British public that is really, really bored with it and just wants to move on. However, we are about to start this COVID inquiry. I think it's October it's meant to start, and that's just going to bring this whole thing up again. I think it's going to put that right at the front of the public's mind, just at the point we're probably going to go into an election within the next 6 months, next year and a half. So essentially that's all going to bring it all back. It's going to be dragged all back up into the public psyche once again. And that's going to be pretty tough for Rishi Sunak, because he is trying really hard to make that dividing line between himself and Boris Johnson, saying he was the guy that ran the previous administration. I'm the new guy, and I'm going to do things a bit differently. I'm going to run a government of integrity, and it's going to be different under me. So it'll be really hard for him when that COVID inquiry starts. But yes, I think there are so many people that are really just sick of this story. And I think yesterday would have seen, oh my gosh, really, yet another one. We're really looking at this again. Is it not time to move on? Boris Johnson is no longer Prime Minister. Does this really matter? And there will also be a lot of people that say, is this really a good use of police time as well? They're going to probably spend a lot of money looking into these allegations. And, this is at a time where so many people on the streets are getting their phones nicked, bikes nicked, burglary up, theft up, all of those things. And they're not seeing their justice be delivered in their own lives. And I think it's quite hard to sort of stomach lots of money being spent on yet another police investigation into a former Prime Minister. And let's not forget, Boris has already been fined for this. Like, obviously, if he does get another fine, at the end of the day, I think people think, was this really a good use of police time? And they did really take their time to consider this before. It could be a really long time before this is over.